Welcome to Sober Sunrise, a podcast bringing you AA speaker meetings with stories of experience, strength, and hope from around the world. We bring you several new speakers weekly, so be sure to subscribe. Whether you join us in the morning or at night, there's nothing better than a sober sunrise. We hope that you enjoy today's speaker.
Today, it's my pleasure to introduce our main speaker, who hails from the Empire State of New York, John R.
I'm John. I'm an alcoholic. I'm an only child alcoholic. I don't want to say that I have a dual problem, but after hearing Edna the other day, I think you will, well, you can be the judge as we go along. I don't know whether I'm caught short or disappointed or sort of overjoyed that Maurice put me on so suddenly because, well, sometimes introductions can be misleading. I happen to be employed by AT&T, and a few weeks ago I attended a seminar, and a gentleman named Bob was introduced as a man who had just closed $1 million oil deal in California. And after the thunderous applause, Bob stood up and said that it was not in California, it was in Pennsylvania. It was in coal, not in oil. They had lost $100,000 and not made it. It was his brother and not himself who was involved. For anyone who is or considers himself or herself not quite an alcoholic or is a little bit nervous about being here or who might want to be referred to as a potential alcoholic, let me give the anonymity tradition this way. I won't tell anybody I saw you here if you don't tell anybody you saw me here. It's a Sunday morning, and I don't think anything can be more spiritual than the pearly gates and St. Peter. But in order to get there have to be events. So if I may take you back to an apartment complex in Long Island a few weeks ago, a gentleman thought that his wife might be dilly-dallying. And what he did, he came home a little early one afternoon, and she was quite disheveled. He quickly raced through the apartment, found no one. But being clever, raced to the window and saw a man going down the fire escape. In a complete rage, he went to the kitchen, wrestled a refrigerator over to the window, and as the gentleman stepped off the fire escape, he let him have it. Scene changes. A few moments later, the pearly gates, and St. Peter is interviewing the applicants. And the first gentleman arrives and he said, "You have lived a good life, my son. What is your last memory?" He said, "I really don't know, St. Peter, how I arrived here." He said, "I locked myself out of my apartment." He said, "Quite normally, I went up the fire escape. I tried the window, it was locked. I came down, that's all I remember." He said, "My son, you have led a good life, you may pass." The second man came up, and he was still rather florid and red in the face. And he said, "St. Peter, I've led a good life, but I was guilty of anger." He said, "Possibly I made a mistake," he said, "but in my rage, in wrestling with this refrigerator, this icebox, he said, Peter said, you took a coronary, my son. But in spite of your rage and your finish, you've lived a good life. You may pass. The last man came up with a very puzzled look, and St. Peter said, my son, how did you arrive? He said, St. Peter, I have no idea. He said, well, what's the last thing you remember? He said, I was sitting in this icebox. It doesn't matter how we got here or how they got there. We're here this morning, and it is one beautiful sight from up here. Most of the time, I'm nervous going on something like this, but this morning I just feel terribly, terribly emotional. I was told by all who had been here that I would enjoy a, quote, loving and an experience that I would not forget. And if I were in the intelligence agencies, I would have to say it's going to take me 3 or 4 days of just laying on a beach on Long Island to try to let come out of me what I've experienced this weekend. And while I love you all, I just have to thank mandatory Elsie Fay and the committee. And I don't usually mention names, but this weekend has been different for this drunk. And so to Mark and Dodie, who are my host, or as my wife would say, he needs a keeper, I am certainly glad they gave him some. To Willard, who brought me back to my early meetings. When he spoke yesterday, you speak of deja vu, except for that soft southeastern drawl. I was back where I came from. His lovely wife, Sue, gave me a tremendous boost coming up here this morning. A gentleman who may have changed my life when I heard one of his very, very early tapes. It was said that it was recorded by Thomas A. Edison himself. But in that tape, Chuck made a statement about chapter 5 and the steps, and pretty much he said that it didn't say we read them. It didn't say we intellectualized them. It didn't say that we talked about them. It said we took them, and so you better took them. And this changed me. Meeting Chuck, I'm an incurable romantic. You see, and this was like a kid with an ice cream cone talking to a man like this. To the lovely Eve, who I haven't been lucky enough to see in quite a few 24 hours. To another good friend, Cecil C. from Canada, who changed my life by telling me you're doing your reading, John. To 2 people who have become extremely close to me, my closest friends, I'd say, in the program. That'd be Dave and Grace from Texas. From new friends, the Boozer, Alabama, and Shirley, who shared with me here. And to a couple of people who you'll know who took me back to my early misled youth out of the big band era, Jim and Chuck and their lovely ladies. To a guy who gave me a tremendous boost last weekend, he's sitting out there, Jerry D. And I love you all. And I just can't say enough about what you've done for me. St. Peter, signpost, and how we got here. It tells me that I shouldn't make excuses. And this is not to be construed as an excuse. But as I said, I was an only child. Now, I may not look it, but I was very delicate. All right, there we go. And my mother took very, very good care of me. In fact, until the time that I was 18 years of age, whenever we sat down to eat, she cut all of my meat. You're jealous. You're jealous. All right. Now, I was an only child, and I ran into this shanty Irish bounty hunter from the other side of the tracks, who was the oldest of 8. We married, or she picked me off, and she would not cut my meat. Now, anyone who's of the medical profession, I will go into my background later, knows that this caused instant trauma. Shock. I said I came out of the big band era. And for anyone who can remember, I can remember the remotes from out here from Balboa and from the Palladium, Palomar Beach. Back east, it was Frank Daly's Meadowbrook and Glen Island Casino, the Rustic Cabin. And on many, many weekends like this on a night, I could be coming back in, hearing the band I had just seen on the radio, with the roof of a convertible down, with a beautiful gal alongside of me, and the glittering lights of the Big Apple out in front. And it was beautiful, and it was fine, and the world was mine. Of course, on some of those nights, strange things happened. I was looking for I was a bit confused. That's a good way of putting it. And I was looking, Manhattan is an island, and they have various bridges and tunnels connecting it with the outlying areas. I was looking for the Queens Midtown Tunnel, and in the shape that I was in, it amounted to a big hole in the ground, is what I was after. Basically, what I did was make a U-turn in heavy traffic in the middle of 42nd Street. It was not the tunnel, it was Grand Central Station loading platform. It's a no-no. You know, even then, I guess I was fairly glib, had a good line, because there was an Irish cop. And I don't know whether we did Mother McCree, Danny Boy, or Irish Soldier Boy, but he escorted me back up, wished me bon voyage, and said, drink no more, my son, this evening. Now, if there is such a thing as a healthy attitude towards alcohol, I had it. You see, because I could call you up the next morning, and I could simply say, where did you hear the stupid thing I did last night? I must have changed from bourbon to scotch. I got on the martinis too heavily because this happened. I could tell you that in this shape I also got home and awoke with a call of nature, and I was lost. I saw a window here, and I knew if the window was here, the door was behind me. And I walked into a wall. But I thought, I was one of those clever alcoholics you hear about. And what I did, I figured it was a reflection in the mirror, so I turned around and walked into another wall, followed by another wall. And I knew I was in the bathroom. What I had done was to step into a sunken bathtub. But again, I could call. There was no hiding it. If you drank the way my crowd did, occasionally funny things like this would happen. To move this right along, there was an early marriage to the bounty hunter. It was a love marriage. We were a couple of crazy kids. I was just about of age, and she was just under. We were in love, and my drinking was heavy. I was a daily heavy hitter for 18 years, without counting any kid stuff. And you see, coming from an Irish background, we sort of had a split family. It was known as like the we and the them. The we's drank at sundown, the thems drank at sunup. The family wanted me to be one of the we's, and so basically I was allowed to sample anything that came in to the house at any time. So I knew about alcohol. I also, unfortunately, in growing up, saw 3 friends killed after I left automobiles. And we wouldn't say they were drunk. They had a few, but not drunk as I would say drunk. But I should have known that there could be an effect. I had an uncle who went from a brilliant executive, took a terrible setback in his personal life with a child that was born dead. And I saw a man drink himself to death in 1 year. So I had the experience of others going for me. My background came out of engineering, and yet, strangely enough, I wound up in industrial relations. And I came up fairly fast. I came through a New York local to their executive board. I was transferred to the international, to the head of an education department, and I wound up as the personal advisor to the president of the International Union. I had it. And if you didn't think I had it, I would tell you I had it. The arrogance was there. The signpost, quite possibly you can see, not a guy who drank with the lampshade on the head, not a guy who started fights, not a guy who had a drink to dance with the young ladies, but one who couldn't stand sloppy drunks or wise guys or lampshades on the head, a dead serious drinker. And while I had a fairly strong capacity, the medical profession would later refer to it as developing a taste for a mind-changing drug. There was pressure, and I thrived in it. Big Mouth had a saying that when it got too tough for anybody else, it was just right for me. I loved it. I drank when I damn pleased. If I had alcohol on my breath 8 o'clock in the morning and you did not like it, you could get yourself someone else. I was top dog, and I would make my own rules. Self-will run rampant? Something like that out of one of those books. But you see, what will happen, pressures begin building, and now the immaculate dress was beginning to get a little wrinkled. The beard showed through a little bit. The assignments got bungled. The reports were late. Now, whether or not anyone out there is alcoholic, if these things are beginning to happen, and you have the reputation of being a heavy hitter, they're going to point to you and say, he drinks. Not like he drinks. He drinks. And so for a guy who drank for the lights and the music and the beauty and the taste and the bouquet, I began hiding for the first time. Not only how much I drank, but when I drank it. Now, who was I kidding? Signpost was there. And things continued to go wrong. Now, if one thing made me successful, it was objectivity. So for want of a better word, let's say one night coming into an assignment, I took what would amount to be a fourth step. And I've got to tell you before we go into this that I knew about Alcoholics Anonymous. I was given an assignment to find out what to do with you, them, the drunks. See, because going back over 20 years ago, it was costing over $20,000 to arbitrate discharges for lost causes. And it wasn't a case of, they never used that word drunk. It was too hard to prove. They would simply say, failure to live up to the terms and conditions of employment. Very impressive. That is, coming in stoned at noon, coming in stoned 8 o'clock in the morning, not coming in on Mondays, little things like that. But that dirty word drunk was never used. It was a lost cause. I went to my own doctor. I went to the Yale and Cornell and Rutgers reports, and what did it tell me? It told me that you had the best track record in the world. Not only did these poor people stop getting soused, which would clear my problem, they seem to be, what do the psychiatrists say? They seem to adjust. Goody. You know. So I went to a few church basements, and, it was nice. Good. It was nice. Nothing wrong with it. It was a wonderful thing, if I didn't exactly think you were all swingers, but, it was good. It was good. Okay. I sat on that train, and I said, buddy, your drinking habits have changed. Your pattern is all different. You're drinking to blot out responsibility. And you're passing up meals. You're using the booze for a quick hitter. Quick hitter. pass up the meal, take a fast shot, get some calories, and keep going. A little bell went off, and it said, "Pal, sick. Sick. You're going to wind up with the goody-goodies in the church basement. You don't watch it. We don't want that." I mean, really, I had nothing against you. You just weren't my type of people. That's simple. Things continued to go wrong. The bride was beginning to get upset. Little things upset her, little things. We were expecting our second child. And being not quite a union member, but a union official, and she did not wish to fly in God's face, so we did not get pink or blue hobby horses. We got pink and blue hobby horses. And the wall that we were going to use them on was really terrible. Anyone in the construction trades, this was a horror. And what I did, I began patching and wallpapering early on a Sunday morning. And I used to improve my breakfast. I improved everything that I drank. I improved my orange juice with gin. I improved my coffee with rye. And as I improved, things began to happen. Now, some of you I've spoken to, and I've mentioned that the Westbury Long Island group is a humble group, and I have what is known as I'm humble. It's sort of militant humility at times, or aggressive humility. And what the bride said, she said, in all honesty, you could take that first panel that he pasted up of the rocking horses, and you could have taken it down and put it into the Louvre. It was magnificent. The orange juice progressed. The coffee progressed. I deteriorated. And her snotty comment at the end was that the nose of one rocking horse was running up the anal canal of the one in front. Hostility. I refer to her as my first wife. She is my only wife, but this, if she were here or if it goes back, it sort of keeps her on her feet a little bit. For anyone, this is a sharing program, who is living with a retired bounty hunter like this, or a hostage taker, may I just add this. Never criticize his or her judgment. They did pick us for their spouses, that's one. And secondly, never tell them you are unworthy. Allow them to discover this for themselves. She joined a group that I shall refer to as, quote, the normal neurotics. She went down there to find out how to sober Golden Boy up. I think that they made her a member of the hostility committee. I have heard reports. They told her, "You don't want anything to happen to him, do you?" She said, "You bet your life I don't. I'm going to get him myself." She had many talents at this time. She could start a fight in an empty room. You know, you've heard that bigamy is having one wife too many. Believe me, at this time, in this case, monogamy was having one wife too many. I never knew what happened to me. I wound up a pitiful drunk. I just completely deteriorated. And I had reached the point I would go to bed and just lay there and pass out. And I would wind up black and blue and battered, and I couldn't figure what happened. I fell out of bed. Aha, yes. Yes, you sadist. I saw it. Then I heard her speak at an Al-Anon meeting, and I knew what happened. Saved my life? You better believe it. What she did, she bought a little doggy. Nice little doggy. Doberman Pinscher. She began beating him with my socks. She was going to introduce us when he became full grown. She had a backup plan. She's a brilliant woman. If this did not work, she was going to use bouillon in my starch and my collars. She was religious. She was deeply religious. New Year's, the feast of the circumcision. Wait. It's a holy day. She celebrated as follows. I was wearing jockey shorts. She pushed me through a double plate glass end table. Was deeply disappointed. Nothing happened. Seriously, I kid. I joke about Al-Anon. But you see, it did save my life. It did save my marriage. And later in my story, you'll see it saved her sanity. I can recall reading many years ago when Bill was asked why there was an Al-Anon. He replied as follows, in his usual way of telling a little story. He told the story of a family that had become hopelessly lost in the woods. And the head of the family found their way back to civilization and safety and left the rest of the family in the woods to shift for themselves. And thus we have an Al-Anon. And thus we have a guy standing here who came in through the back door. Now, I was not too pleased with her destroying my anonymity this way. This weekend brought back memories. Sleeping on the grass was nice. I used to practice that. I'd woke up many Sunday mornings on the grass. And yet I was annoyed that she was destroying my good name by going out with this bunch of neurotics. What she did, they told her to go to open AA meetings and find out what was wrong with me. She joined an organization. Do you Al-Anons, have you ever heard of a club called the Red Ring Club? Anybody hear of the Red Ring Club? Oh, all right. Here's how you work this. Newcomers. You go to an AA meeting. If the spouse is hostile towards AA, you do want to read the literature. So you take it into the bathroom, and if you do not put the seat down and you read extensively, you join the Red Ring Club. I was progressing very, very rapidly in my deterioration. A few years ago, Rutgers came out with the D's, and it was something like delusion, disillusion, disappointment, desperation, and despair. I went through them awful fast because the fun and games, from the time I went to a personal doctor and said, quote, "Do you think I'm alcoholic?" And he said, "No, but you drink too much," until the time I came in through these doors was 18 months. Now, we hear about alcoholism and a progression coming down like a leaf, down, up, but the direction down. I went straight off a cliff. In 18 months, Golden Boy here, in those days we did not have the lovely rest homes. We had something called Ward O. It was a locked psycho ward. We had other locked psycho wards. Not only did I make the wards, I made straitjackets on 6 occasions. My whole life came down around my ears. Didn't come down, as I say, like the house of cards, dominoes. It came down like an arch when you pull the keystone. And I said I had become arrogant. You see, I had become my own higher power. I could do anything, and the record backed me up. But now I was hopeless and helpless. The bride was seeing a lawyer. Where could I go? There was a big black pit, a Stygian darkness, and I was falling down it and didn't know what to do, and there was terror. Terror. The guy who never lost suddenly found out he was ill-equipped to face life. And there was no place to go, and there was nothing to grab. And the horror continued. Mental, physical, and spiritual. Mentally, the state of New York and the lock wards can attest to my state. spiritual. I never had the audacity to deny a higher power or a God. But I had long since stopped paying any worship. When I reached the top, I would render unto God what God needed. You see, and since I hadn't gone to God when I was sailing along in the clouds, by the insane code I live by, I couldn't go to God when I was laying flat on my back, hopeless and helpless and dying. And it wasn't like that great American dream of the movie where the cowboy walks into the sunset with the troubles of the world on his shoulders and grimly carries on. The hard guy became an object of pity. He became poor devil, sitting at the end of a bar trying to hold body and soul together with a drink, falling apart and shaking, lost, confused, pitiful. The end of the world, not with a bang, but with a whimper. One other problem. I had reached a point in the International Union where I could not be fired. I knew where literally too many bodies were buried. Yes, so I was untouchable, right? I found out slightly after I came in that they were beginning to take the chance and fire me. But they were going to do it a little bit differently. They were going to do it ready, aim, fire. I came in, and I made one last shot. I prided myself. I've heard this disease called insidious, cunning and baffling. And for me, it was insidious because it completely destroyed the objectivity. I no longer could see or would see what was happening to me. There was nothing left but me and that drink. One last shot. The finish of my service career was in experimental submarines. There was extensive psychological and psychiatric tests taken. I knew my, quote, profile. I went back in for a week of intensive care. I released the service records. I got out some medical books. I wanted to help them. I have a very close friend in New York, and I'm going to have to use his expression. He does it much better than me. I was looking for a big hyphenated word that would explain what was happening to me. Something very, very impressive. The reports came down that all of my neurosis were running wild. I was unadjusted, but if I would stop drinking, I'd be okay. I told them they didn't know what the hell they were talking about. I went back to that book, Abnormal Psychology, and as my friend puts it, and I can identify with him, I could identify with every hyphenated disease in that book but two. I was not an alcoholic, and I was not a lesbian. I came in through those doors. Everything else was gone. And I came in for one reason. I had one thing going for me. I didn't come in here to identify. I came in because I was a dying drunk and I was looking to live. Survival, no other reason. Survival. And I was charming. I felt that most of the arrogance had been knocked out of me because Bill tells us that the only way for an alcoholic to get humility is repeated and repeated humiliation. And I had suffered that. And standing in the doorway, I'll respect the anonymity, I won't use his name, was a person who greeted me like this. You don't look too good. He says, you know what's wrong with you? I just looked. I wouldn't talk. This was what was wrong with people like you. We had people like him in doorways. His next remark ended it all. He said, you got a threefold disease. I said, I beg your pardon. He said, threefold. I don't want to be vulgar. I said, what the hell is a threefold disease? He says, threefold. Mental, physical, spiritual. Threefold. I gave this, said, it's come to this. It really has come to this. Then I got the bad shock. Another guy walked up and says, that's one of our winners. I didn't want to see the losers, believe me. No way, that was good enough for John. I sat out there, and I became obsessed with one idea. I had lost many, many battles in my life, never lost a whole war. But this one was final, absolute, and complete. I had lost it, and I didn't like it. But watch the pronoun here. I read all of your literature. I read the big book. I read AA Comes of Age. Notice that big pronoun, I. I went to 90 meetings in 90 days. You asked me what was going on. It's swell, swell, great, great, swinging, swinging, beautiful, beautiful. They all said what a great pigeon this kid is. And I schemed. And I schemed. I did do one thing. I felt that most of you were hopelessly illiterate in the use of the English language. And so I went to the dictionary and I looked up the words obsession and compulsion so that they would not be used interchangeably and we could have intelligent closed meetings. I think this is the only thing that beat me in my aim of being voted AA Rookie of the Year. This upset some people. One night I heard a gentleman who was speaking up here, and he was sharing about 25 years of 24 hours. And I said very, very smartly, I know more about this stupid thing that almost killed us than he does. Because I know a hell of a lot about alcoholism. What I knew about the program remains to be seen. Still no way out. Whether I read it in those Yale and Cornell and Rutgers reports or you told me in here, basically my sentence, and I regarded it as such, was that I was addicted to a mind-changing substance. Well, I might get some smarts back. Well, I might get a little love back. Never again physically would I pick up a drink safely. And that was the sentence. But I heard another gifted individual, same background, industrial relations, engineering, self-starting type of guy, dynamic. And what he did, now listen carefully, he used science. See, right away the doubt is, keep an open mind, please, until you hear this. What Ed did was to follow instructions and change where he drank, how he drank, and when he drank, which is way of life. He changed his entire pattern of drinking. He changed his hours of drinking. He kept copious notes. He went so far as to begin a bar graph with this, pardon that word. And at the end of 9 months, for you doubting Thomases, Edward had proven successfully he was no longer alcoholic. Now, how does that grab you, huh? Huh? See? He came to this conclusion in a straitjacket in Knickerbocker Hospital. So much for science. No way out. Enter the next phase, spirituality. What I did, I let go and let God. I had exactly 90 days and was to make my first talk. And what I did was to pray to God to restore my former drinking powers. All right, now you smile. But if anyone has a better way of beating what's got me up here this morning than this, please see me after the meeting. Now notice, I didn't say, please God, let me have a drink. No, nothing like that. I basically said, please God, let me drink the way I always drank, like a pig. Because, you know, the idea of having one, and counting them, hey, come on, forget it. I had enough brains to know I was much better off without that. And you see, I went to a lot of meetings. If anything went wrong, I could go back to Westbury that night, and I could say, all right, I took the noble chemical experiment, and it didn't work, and I'm sorry, and so what? I had to take one last shot. Insanity? Sure. You see, because I refer to myself as a retarded alcoholic. I stopped smoking 10 years ago and caught pneumonia. I had delayed blackouts. I came in here and was dry 10 days and took an alcoholic convulsion that left me out for 70 minutes. And in reading about that in those books, it told me I was prone. And if I drank again and I withdrew again, there was a pretty good chance I was going to die, or I was going to have more brain damage than I am exhibiting here this morning talking to you. Okay, little advice for anyone who wants to try it. After 90 days of clean living, do not make the first one 10 ounces of Smirnoff 100 on the rocks. It started down, and I had an idea maybe I should try to put the toothpaste back into the tube. It was about as good an idea as a parachute that opens on the second bounce. Didn't work, and I know it. But now you see the horror starts. Because the one thing I hadn't heard in those 90 days was that the drunk who takes the drink is not the drunk who made the plans. And so the horror started. I couldn't get off the drunk. I couldn't get off the drunk. And this time it was horror because Smarty, who looked up obsession and compulsion, was now living them. And the drink became nothing but something to hold body and soul together. And terror was now added to the rest. Because, you see, the convulsion was waiting at the end. And I had to stop, and I was afraid to stop. Again, the big I. The I. Terror. Sheer terror. Despair. It was there. When I came in, I said I refrained from suicide because I was afraid of hurting myself. I don't think that's true. I honestly believe that a higher power, as I understand him, chose not to give me enough to spare. Because unfortunately, in sharing with you, I've seen that any alcoholic who is given too much to spare will end it. And so I thank my God for this. I got back into Westbury. Nothing else but the grace of God. A 13-day drunk. And standing in the doorway was not lovely Treefold. Because I don't think I could have taken him telling me, "I'm sin no more. In 6 months you'll be walking in the green, green grass and singing." I couldn't have taken it. Standing in the doorway was an ogre. Ogre is the only word for it. Everyone else, when I was saying how beautiful and what a wonderful pigeon I was, they were saying he's a phony. He's mouthing it. He's got nothing inside. And that was waiting in the doorway. The conversation went as follows. "You look bad." "I feel bad, Ed. I feel very bad. I'm sick. I'm very sick." He said, "Do you feel guilt?" I said, "I feel terrible guilt, Ed." He said, "You think you left everybody down?" I said, "I left everybody." He said, "You let your wife down?" I said, "I let my wife down." He said, "Do you feel like a dirty bum?" I said, "Yes, Ed, I do." He said, "Do you know why?" I said, "Why, Ed?" He said, "Because you are a dirty bum." Where was the love? Oh, yeah. Half dead, poor person suffering. Anyone who needs a sponsor, follow the next conversation. He said, "I am your sponsor." I said, "What makes you think you can be my sponsor?" He says, 3 inches and 40 pounds. So I came in. I didn't damn the people. I didn't damn your program. I simply felt I was a loser. Because, you see, I had done everything. And as insane as that attempt was, it was the most honest I could be at that time. And this was strike two. I not only was a drunk, I was an unsuccessful drunk. And I sat out there and I felt that I would sit on my hands and play out the cards, because it was hopeless. But you see, at this point, something happens. Bill refers to it as nonverbal communication. And I watched people who spoke off these lecterns like a hawk. And most of them were living the life that they were talking. Couldn't deny it. I saw pussycats who became tigerish, and tigers who became a little pussycatty. You see, and that's why Willard brought me back yesterday, because I approached one, and I said, how do I get what you have? We all know what happened. He said, Chapter 5, my son. And I said, stop that, that's rubbish. He said, you got a better way? He said, doing things your way not only has made you an unsuccessful drunk, it's almost ruined your life. Your way, your way. I met a friend who used to write for the films, and he tells the story many years ago of, for those of you who remember the older movies, Edna May Oliver, a very, very aristocratic gal about 6 foot tall. And she was working a scene with what he referred to as a young male ingenue. The scene was blown 4 times. Finally, the young male ingenue turned to the grand dame and said, this time we'll do this my way. And she looked down that aristocratic nose and said, your way? You don't have a way. You know, I had just gotten to the point where these steps made a little sense to me when I took my header. So I wanted to jump right back in. And they said, no, wait. You know anything about him? I said, I read the book. They said, well, look, understand one thing. They're the means to an end, not an end in themselves. They're a journey and not a destination. Very impressive. They told me that Bill referred to them as the building blocks of sobriety. They said that he broke them from 6 steps into 12 because he was afraid with those blocks that the drunks might fall between the cracks. I was very impressed. I felt very much like the little boy who was in school, and the teacher said, if you have to go to the bathroom, please raise your hand. And the little kid said, what the hell good is that going to do? I said, look, I'm not ready. I've got the slogans. This booming voice behind me said, look, kid, the slogans are first aid. You need major surgery. My idea at this point, I took this about as seriously, even in the shape I was in. For any who were of my generation, my mother used to warn me, quote, if you wear your rubbers in the movies, you will go blind. And that is just about the way I took these steps. 1, 2, and 3, you know, I got into them, it was sort of like rote. I said, you know, I did 1. They said, no, you didn't do 1. I said, look, no, now listen, please. 1, you're the sum total of your entire life. And no matter what mountains you have climbed, what success you've had, it's not exactly a swinging success coming through those doors. Didn't like to hear it, but, you know, didn't argue. They said you were resigned to being an alcoholic. You didn't accept it. I didn't see much difference. I was an alcoholic. They said, you're powerless over alcohol whether it's in you or not in you. And as far as your life being unmanageable, my friend, if you look at what happened to you in 18 months, it's not unmanageable, it's unbelievable. Big book. Oh, big thing. Faith without works is dead. You can't talk yourself into them. I said, well, how do I show that I have accepted it? They said, you'll do something about it by going on to the next step. What a brilliant answer. These were the people that had my life in their hands. I'm Irish, and I got to share this. They tell a story about the Irishman who caught the little leprechaun, asked for the pot of gold. And he said, I'm not a pot of gold leprechaun, I'm a 3-wish leprechaun. He said, but one catch. Whatever I give to you, I will double for your worst enemy, Sweeney. He said, very well. He said, give me a 10-room house. He had it, Sweeney had a 20, and he mumbled. He said, your next wish? He said, 10 beautiful dancing girls. Sweeney had 20. He said, thank you, Sean, you're not bad. The little leprechaun said, what is your final wish? And looking over at Sweeney and his 20 beautiful maidens, he said, You'll double anything? He said, double anything. He said, reduce my sexual drive by 50%. On into the next step, 2. The charge of the Light Brigade. People say they had trouble with 2. You see, for me, it was a cop-out. My life had become a horror and a sewer. And so when I could go to a group such as you and you could tell me I was off the norm when this took place, I could buy it. I could buy it very, very, very easily. What you did for me, as Willard said yesterday, bad sick, good well. You told me that I wasn't a bad guy trying to get good, that I was a sick person trying to be well. And right there you took that hair shirt off me. Sure, responsible I am, but I was sick. You handed it to me, and it was beautiful. And what it was for me, it was a lifeline back to society. You spliced it for me, and that splice, thank God, is still there today. But there's only one thing about that splice back into life. It's soluble. It will dissolve in alcohol. 3 was a horror. I had fallen away from everything. I wanted nothing to do with God. Nothing to do with a higher power. They said, hold up. Don't confuse yourself. Don't define anything. 3 was handed to me very, very simply. It told me what I did not have to do. I didn't have to define a God. I just had to admit that there was something in this world greater than myself, that I could no longer govern my own life. I said, thoughts and will, what are you talking about? Some crazy... He said, look, make it practical. Make it thoughts and actions to a spiritual code. Can you do that? I said, I can. They said, and believe and go on. Looking back, what the hell did I do? 1, 2, 3. Physical, mental, and spiritual. I couldn't sober up. 2, God could sober me up. 3, I let him. It's really that easy. 4, I had fun with. Went back to that big ogre and said, I did it mentally. Did it up here. Did the whole inventory. He said, how long did it take? About 20 minutes. A few things wrong. Nothing major. Now, we talk about charlatans and con men in here. Wait till you hear this next one. Everyone waited for the crushing blow to fall, but he didn't. He said, John, do you wish to help the suffering alcoholic? I said, of course. He said, look at it this way. Go and write down a little bit, and maybe you could find one serious fault. That way, when you 12-step someone, they'll have something to identify with. Oh, the con. The con was beautiful. Fell for it. Right into it. I was guided. On every one of these steps, I read that book, and I went around and I asked you, how did you do it? Because I wanted the key for me. And if your answer was that you received joy and a great release, I did exactly what you did. I put my feet where you would put yours before me. I didn't experiment. And so I found a person that said, John, the 4th step is not how many times you slept around or how much money you have stolen. It is basically what drives you. What makes John go? Love, hate, avarice. And so I began writing down motive. And it got painful, and I just let it lay. And I don't know if it took 18 days or 18 months, but at the end of it, I met myself. I knew me. And strangely enough, I'm supposed to get my release on 3, but I got my release on 4, because I knew John for better or for worse. I knew what I was. I knew what made me tick. And I promptly sat there. Enter back into this a beautiful young girl, my wife's baby sister. Carried her on my neck when we were going together. And here she was at the age of 19 with a busted marriage and hooked on drugs. The baby of 8 tore her father's heart out. And I was sober a little over a year. And we took her in. And lo and behold, Peggy was clean when she came to us. You know what Peggy found? The socially acceptable drug. Alcohol. She could get a release, and it was socially acceptable. It was beautiful. It was also instant alcoholic. And if I went down fast off a cliff, Peggy went down faster. There was no addiction time. She was shot from the first drink. It became so bad that the great guard here one night came home and knew I was going to have to commit her. I didn't want to put the horror back on her father. And after all, you'll have to understand, this kid was a hopeless alcoholic. Hopeless. And I had been hidden in my horror of alcoholism. Not many had seen the senior paragon brother-in-law go down into the gutter. And as I walked into Peggy's room to tell her we're going to put her in the happy house, a little voice said, "Hey, buddy, who in the hell are you to tell anyone that they're hopeless? Who in the hell are you to use that word with your record? And no matter what it costs you, you're going to go in there and you're going to tell that kid what AA is all about." And so I went in, and if there's such a thing as the beginning of spirituality for me, it was telling her a story that no other human being has heard since or again. I wanted to show her that she wasn't bad, that I could top her in spades. I didn't preach, I didn't proselytize. I talked as one poor devil in torment to another. And it's happy. Peg comes into AA. She goes to meetings, she meets people, and it's wonderful. One thing, she saw the revolving door. She was a kid, people went in, people came out. Why not? She'd go back out, another chance, got a little older, right? Not right. Peg got one shot, went out, 6 days later she was dead. Dead. My wife's beautiful baby kid sister. One shot. One. Hate? My wife hated me. She hated every drunk who came through that door, and she really hated those who came through that door more than once. Absolute hatred. And there was not a damn thing I could do about it. Pray. And I said, Al-Anon saved my life in the beginning. And thank God it saved my wife's sanity. Because without those women to huddle around and hold her hand, I just don't know what would have happened. I am deeply, deeply in love with every Al-Anon out there. 6, talked about something, shortcomings, character defects. I found a few. You see, but it was all. It said all. That damn absolute. I hate it. Absolute. 6, all. All of them. They told me I couldn't pick and choose. They told me I had to change or I would drink again. Ho, we'll hear the next one. Alcohol comes in people, not in bottles. I think that was threefold again. Alcohol comes in people, not in bottles. The wisdom of the ages off this kid. I fought back. I said very, very smartly, look, about this change. God made me this way. Maybe we better not tamper. I was told very, very bluntly that to hold on to any of these defects, believing that they could cause me to drink again, was quite possibly a cause of the loony bin, the insanity. Maybe I better go back, do not pass go back to step 2 and start over. So I did exactly what you suggested. I gave up conceit. I gave up self-centeredness. Gave up temper. Not easy, but I got rid of them like that. I said, go, leave me. Make me pure. Take me, I'm yours. This lasted for possibly 24 seconds, 24, I don't know how. I didn't learn a damn thing. When I came back in here and they told me that quite possibly I had missed the entire spiritual message of this program with the I, that it was a we program. We. The love of one drunk for another. Nowhere in the steps did the I appear. Here I did it again. Myself, try it. And so you see, what I did on 6 was after complete and absolute frustration. Not even my sponsor. Treefold comes up. Curse of my life. And he says, all else fails, follow instructions. I said, what are the instructions? He said, ask God. I said, get away from me. Get away from me. In comes the ogre. He said, look, John, be sensible. If you believe that something outside of yourself lifted that obsession, what else can this do if you'll only ask? He said, you know the spiritual index? I said, in the front of the book. Index is in the front of the big book. I read it 3 times. He said, no, it's in the back. I said, the front, the back. We fought. He said, go home and find it. And it's way, way in the back. Little paragraph. Sneaky. Spiritual index. And it simply says that there's one blockage to all growth and one rule which will stop all learning. And that is simply ridicule without investigation. Close-mindedness. And so I simply got on my knees and said, God, please help me. Not for today, but for 24 seconds. Or 1 second. Or for now. Just for now. Please, God, help me for now. And I said I was retarded, and it shows up here again. You see, I was living a 24-hour program for drinking, but a 24-hour program for living. Took me 7 steps to get there. Retarded, most certainly. 8 had it all going for me. Couldn't miss. See, 8 says something about, writing, making list. And I got introduced to that word, resentment. They said, do you have any resentments? I said, no, not a one. See, right away, cynics, don't listen, not a one. I was an advanced case. What was bothering me was absolute hatred. There were still people maybe going to shoot. They said, read it. You're illiterate. So you got to do anything. Make a list. And ask yourself, all you got to do is not be a judge, not be a juror, not be a prosecutor. You simply got to be a scribe. You've got to ask the question, have you ever heard anybody in your entire life, do you want to do anything about it? That's all it says. And then we come to the big one, 9. It says, put your money where your mouth is. Actually, and going back to those old timers again, forgetting all of the kid stuff, what had I done on 9? I had completely wrecked a family unit. Tore it to pieces. So you see, while I had a relationship with my wife and a relationship with each of my kids, we didn't have a family unit. So I went to a guy and I said, how do I put this back together again, expecting some more wisdom of the ages? The answer came as follows. The family that eats together stays together. I thought this must be Treefold's brother. There's such a thing as fourfold. Here was another one. He said, what I'm telling you, kid, he said, is just sit down at a meal and try not to give anybody the potatoes on the head who displease you. And you know what? It worked. The individual relationships started getting back to being a family. And so there we are, we're at 9, and the way those ogres gave it to me, they're all written in retrospect there. Look back and cry, that's it, here you are. At least 10, 11, and 12 for today. Now on 10 I got to be very, very careful. I used to say, you housewives will understand this, and did I get jumped? They call me sexist, chauvinist. That was the nicest things they called me when I said that one night. So please, any feminist out there, take notes. You house people will understand this. If I don't put the garbage out on a daily basis, it's going to begin to smell. And if it begins to stay there long enough, it's going to start to rot. And so you see, I've got to take that inventory, continue to take it daily. Get rid of the garbage. That's all it's telling me. Get rid of it, kid. It'll kill you. Little ones will pile up. Am I square with the house people? 11 I thought was beautiful. I said I'm employed by AT&T, and my field is communications. Some fool told me that learning to communicate was learning how to listen. That shows how little he knew. But I read the 11th step as follows, quote, thought through prayer and meditation to make God aware of my will. Beautiful. Just beautiful. There it was. Hand it to me. Make God aware of my will. Broke my heart again. Seriously, all I can say is that with the daily reprieve, at first I learned to pray for myself. And then once in a while I could pray for somebody else. And there has been some growth, because now just once in a while, when everything else has failed again, I can pray for God's will. There has been a little bit of growth on 11 for me. 12, the icing on the cake. To me, it had to be in 3 pieces. It said, having had a spiritual awakening as a result of these steps, what this gave me was a self that I could live with. We try to carry the message to the suffering alcoholic, a cause that I could live for, and try to practice these principles in all of my affairs, a code that I could live by. When I came in, there was an old saying that said, man takes drink, drink takes drink, and drink takes man. And this drunk has come to believe that man takes steps, steps take steps, and steps take man. In speaking to the committee before the talk began, they said the format is for you to talk a little, and they're going to listen a little, and for God's sake, try to finish before they do. Got to show off this classic lit background. Mark Twain put it another way. He said that a preacher came in and preached for the missions. And he was at the services, and he was so impressed with this man's preaching, he was going home, take out a mortgage on his house, and give it to the missions. Well, he said, this preacher went on for 5 hours. He said, at the end of that time, I took $1 out of the collection basket. The hopeless one came in with the simple faith of a child, and I believed. And I found my tooth fairy, and I found Peter Pan, and I found Tinkerbell in here. I was blessed. I want to phrase this properly. My children allowed me to play with them. There's an AA baby, and they say out of the mouth of children you can hear wisdom. A few years ago I was taking them to a cultural event called Mickey Mouse on Parade. We have since graduated to Bugs Bunny meets the superheroes. But the 2 older kids, who are approximately 5 years older than the baby, thanked me, said, thanks, Dad, for taking us to see this. And this little 6-year-old kid said, he didn't take us, he brought us with him. There was a gentleman who devoted his life to Alcoholics Anonymous, Bob H., who was retired as the general manager of the General Service Office. And Hitch was reminiscing one night, And he said, quote, at an opening conference dinner at one time, Bill asked a rhetorical question. Could we, he wondered, survive in a hopeless and perilous world should such a world someday confront us? Could we, for example, survive in a dictatorship? And Bob ended as follows. I think we need have no fear. Let the cold winds blow if they must and the night darken. You and I know a land where the light is bright and there's a stillness of the spirit. A land we can live in for as long as we wish, for it exists really only in our hearts. It's a magical land called Alcoholics Anonymous. The good Lord, I believe, created AA for us. May it be His will for us to keep it safe. God bless you. Thank you and good morning.
Thank you for listening to Sober Sunrise. If you enjoyed today's episode, please give it a thumbs up as it will help share the message. Until next time, have a great day.